It's not all about money.
I think it's a scapegoat. If we had more money, we could hire this or do this.
It's become fashionable to say, oh, it's a waste, it's a cesspool.
The problem is in what happened once the money got there.
Camden, I think people often forget how poor the city is. There's just a sense of hopelessness, that this is just a cycle that I'm stuck in. There's not many streets in Camden that you can drive down that you don't, how is this in New Jersey? How is this right next to a Collingswood or a Cherry Hill or a Haddonfield? You can go on one street and it looks like there are 14 houses and 12 are abandoned and closed up.
Camden, New Jersey is the poorest small city in America, but it's also a case study in how government programs have proven tragically ineffective at ameliorating poverty. State and federal taxpayers have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on various revitalization projects in Camden over the years, but the money never ended up where it was supposed to, and nothing changed. By far the largest initiative to combat poverty with government largess has been directed at Camden's public schools. New Jersey spends about 60% more on public education per pupil than the national average, or about $19,000 in 2013. In Camden, per pupil spending was more than $25,000, making it one of the highest spending districts in the nation. And yet all that extra money hasn't changed the fact that Camden's schools are among the worst in the state, known for their abysmal test scores, high rates of in-school violence, dilapidated buildings, and high dropout rates. The story of how Camden became one of the nation's best funded and worst performing school districts begins in the early 1980s, when a small nonprofit called the Education Law Center filed a landmark lawsuit called Abbott v. Burke. At the time, poor cities in New Jersey like Camden were getting about 25% less funding for their schools than New Jersey's more affluent suburbs. Rutgers law professor Paul Trachtenberg was one of the legal architects of Abbott v. Burke.
So we had the winners and the losers, and typically the winners were white suburban students and the losers were the growing number of black students living in cities, and the disparities in what was spent on their education and in the quality of the school buildings and the school programs and the class size was dramatic.
It's not all about money.
Saul Cooperman was the state education commissioner under New Jersey Governor Tom Kean, and he fought Abbott v. Burke on the grounds that the school districts in cities like Camden were rife with mismanagement, waste, and corruption.
Schools were money pots. So it was patronage on a huge scale, and also contracts. You could set up corporations to go for contracts, you could subcontract that out. And though I saw some good people in urban schools, mostly I saw politicized problems at the top.
But Trachtenberg, along with Marilyn Morehouser, a former nun and civil rights activist, who litigated Abbott v. Burke, framed the issue in stark moral terms.
More and more, these kids are disadvantaged. How can you not give the kids money? They didn't want to go in and see what the exact problem was, and was it a money problem?
I don't want to make this ad hominem, but you've got in Tom Kean and Saul Cooperman, two white suburban guys who knew pretty much zero about urban education. We've created this kind of mythology, which is very handy for white suburbanites to say, well, we don't want to send money to those corrupt, inefficient, ineffective places.
Children of color are citizens just as fully as are their counterparts in wealthy suburbs.
There's no person I know who doesn't believe that Marilyn Morehouser was a saint. And there's no person I know who doesn't think that the goal of equalizing funding in the districts wasn't the right one to pursue. The problem is in what happened once the money got there.
Saul Cooperman's warnings would turn out to be prophetic. After the Abbott money started flowing out of Trenton in the late 1990s, the state launched an ambitious school construction program targeted at fixing the dilapidated school buildings in Camden and the other so-called Abbott districts.
And what we found was that less than half of the proposed schools got built, and $1 billion of the money got lost. The audits of the conditions afterwards were very clear. People were paying out their friends. The cost overruns were unbelievable.
They're the same things that still go on. Jobs and contracts. Jobs and contracts. That's money that doesn't go to kids.
Mismanagement and corruption also continued to weigh on the day-to-day operations in Camden and many of the other Abbott districts. A 2008 audit of Camden's district office found a chaotic management culture, a lack of standard accounting practices, and questionable use of state funds, such as $13 million spent over 2 years on travel expenses for school staffers to attend education conferences. The state Supreme Court also mandated that New Jersey fund universal preschool in Camden and the other Abbott districts.
So that thing has been good. I think the problem is that people sell pre-K as the answer to K-12 dysfunction. And if you don't fix K-12, you waste the gains of pre-K.
It's become fashionable to say, oh, it's a waste, it's a cesspool, it's money down the rat hole, all these not very complimentary phrases. But the state is the ultimately responsible actor for education. So that being the case, to the extent there are failures in the administration of schools, in the proper use of money, it's the state that's ultimately responsible. And that's undeniable as a matter of law.
It is easy to say that it is the state's responsibility because it just absolves every district of their complete and utter fiscal and educational failure for kids over the last 30 years.
A lack of resources is not a problem. I actually despise that argument. I think it's a scapegoat. We need more money. If we had more money, we could hire this or do this. It's just a Band-Aid to the problem. Why not address the real issue, which is what's broken right in front of you?
Bridget Cusado Rosa is the principal of Freedom Prep, one of 10 charter schools in Camden. Just as the Abbott money started to flow in the late 1990s, New Jersey's first charter schools began opening, and they've demonstrated that it's possible to do an effective job of educating kids from poor backgrounds with significantly less money. Charters get about 70% of the funding per pupil as traditional public schools, but they're also more insulated from the corrupting influence of politics. For one thing, they have to pay for their school buildings out of their own budgets. Freedom Prep is located on the 5th floor of a hospital.
You find a way to make it work. You cut out things that are incidentals, that don't matter in pushing a child to college. If you put the focus on your teachers and your scholars' education, everything else you can figure out.
Is money important? Yes, the teachers must be well paid, or you can't recruit teachers to work in Camden or Jersey City or Elizabeth. But if you're paying the teachers well, and I submit you look at urban salaries and they are paid very, very well, as are the principals and superintendents. So that's not a money issue. There are no quick generalizations. And the proof of the pudding is, hasn't changed because of the money.
My father was a homeless drug addict before I could even walk and talk. I wasn't supposed to make it out. I wasn't supposed to graduate high school. I wasn't supposed to go to college.